Yeah, are you set, Supratim?
Yes, I'm all set. Can you see my screen?
Yeah, it is very much
Okay, perfect.
visible. So I'll give a small introduction and then hand it over to you. Uh, Warm welcome and good evening once again in today's webinar. Uh, Myself, Shushoban Mukherjee from Prime InfoServe. Many of you are already aware of for last 3 weeks. During our lockdown phase, we are conducting this kind of afternoon and evening kind of webinars as our technology sessions. Once the COVID outbreak forced us in a lockdown state and work from home kind of situations, we thought let us revisit all our technologies, processes, and all that. So how we can adapt to the new situations. In that context, you might have seen we have done 15 odd webinars already in different technologies, tools, and processes. So in this journey, we have today an interesting webinar today lined up. The session is, you can already see, it is about privacy, data protection, and e-contracting. We have Mr. Supratim Chakraborty. Let me give a small introduction of him, then I'll hand it over to him. Supratim is a partner in a corporate and commercial practice group of Khaitan Company. He specializes in corporate and commercial transactions, mergers, acquisition, joint ventures, and general corporate law advisory. Has advised eminent client in relation to information technology laws in India, including data privacy and cybersecurity related issues. He has advised several clients on anti-bribery and anti-corruption law related issues as well. Amongst other laurels, Supratim has been recognized as a Nobel practitioner in the IFLR 1002020 ranking. He has also been categorized as recommended lawyer in the prestigious RSG India Report 2019. Supratim is a member of ASSOCHAM's National Council for FinTech, Digital Assets and Blockchain Technology. He has spearheaded some of the important stakeholder consultation bids, feedback sessions, organized by industry association on the draft Personal Data Protection Bill. Supratim holds a GDPR FAS certification and DPO certifications. He has spoken at eminent forums and has authorized several articles for renowned publications. He is extensively quoted in national dailies on a regular basis. So from here, before I hand it over to Mr. Supratim Chakraborty, I will set the ground rules of the sessions I do in every session. Throughout his presentation, all of you, all the participants will be in a muted mode. If you have any specific queries, you can use the chat box. I will work as a moderator and park those questions. Once Supratim finishes the presentation, I'll translate the questions back to him, and then we'll open up the forum so that we can have a direct interaction and question and answer session. Thank you. Over to you, Supratim.
Thank you very much, Shoshoban, for your kind words. And thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for your collective time. I think this is a very good time indeed to get on with these sessions, see, beef up some of our learnings. Uh, Perhaps a bit of it is known to us, some of it is not known to us. So, what we're trying to do is have this series of discussions with you. You can pick up from, this whatever you think is relevant. So, when Shushoban and me we started, discussing about this particular session, we thought that in today's condition, two words are absolutely tabooed. Okay, one is webinar, and the other one is COVID. So we will try and keep that as the sidelines, whilst that is the reason why we are all, we are all here. But the point is that on the sides or in the pretext of this, we will also learn something which would be otherwise relevant for all of us in our organizations going forward also. So in normal parlance also, legally or otherwise, these things are required to be done. COVID is just a pretext under which we will start talking about all these aspects. But going forward, as you see, as life could, turn these things that we are doing today into the new normal. This would be, you know, our day-to-day survival strategy, things that we will actually adopt going forward as well. So with that, I will quickly jump onto my presentation. I hope you can see the change slide. Shushaban, is that visible?
Yeah, it is fine.
Okay, great. Thank you. So, in any organization, there are these three types of data that we have in any uh, at any given point in time. And whether it is a small organization, whether it is a large organization, it does not matter. These data sets remain uniform. And as I will speak, you will realize that the problems that we are facing today and the solutions that I am going to tell you about can be implemented by anyone and everyone almost inexpensively. So as big times are becoming tougher, we all are thinking how to conserve cash, how to keep as much to our organization ourselves as much as possible, and equip ourselves so that within the limited resources that we have, we are able to do much more. So I will also, during the process of this particular presentation, show you how you can, with your resources, however minimal it is, you can achieve a lot. So, so this slide, if you see on the right hand side, you have a large set of confidential data, and that is basically say your customers know-how, your know-how, all of this. This necessarily, may or may not have personal data or sensitive personal data. This could be other technical information, etc. Some of this is protected by intellectual property, but largely this is protected through contractual measures. You decide amongst yourselves as to how it is to be protected. Okay, so what are the provisions you put? Therefore, you will put things like, you know, due diligence, which is carried out by the giver of the information to the receiver of the. You will also say that I should have a right to audit. I should have a right to inspect, get reports from you. If there is a breach, you will let me know, so on and so forth. So this is a very interesting time that we are living in. We have suddenly moved every information which is maybe possibly otherwise available only in office to the homes or houses of our employees. It is important, therefore, to just quickly take a look at those agreements and arrangements that we have with our clients or customers who have given us or provided this data of theirs in confidence. And if there is anything that you are doing otherwise, maybe it is a good time to reach out and take a waiver. Otherwise, you could get into a situation where you are, troubled with some kind of a issue or a litigation or a notice is slapped, um, because you possibly missed mentioning the new way in which the information is being handled. On the left hand side, if you see, is the large bucket of personal data. Now, what is personal data? For example, just before the lockdown happened, organizations were taking travel history related details from all of us, and that is personal data. So any information which you can link to a natural person would be a personal data. Mind you, globally, all privacy related laws that are there, whether it is European Union's general data protection regulation, whether it is today's law in the country, whether it is the future upcoming law, which is the personal data protection bill, all of this only get triggered if you are able to identify who the natural person is. So in order to be a personal data, you need to be able to connect such a information to a natural person, whether directly or indirectly. For I'll give you a nice example. So we were doing an implementation for one of the large retail giants, and they said, no, we don't take any personal information. I said, okay. We started looking into this organization's workings and functioning, and we observed that at the checkout counter where you pay and get out, there was a person who was taking all the mobile numbers. Okay, so if when you go to bill, you'll see they will ask for your mobile number and then punch in the bill and all that. So we asked, what are you doing here? So he said that, yeah, of course, we know the mobile numbers of these individuals and we have completely trailed them basis that. So we know this particular person behind the mobile number comes every Saturday or Sunday and, will pick up baby food, diapers, etc. So we know maybe that person has a kid. So we have trailed these people. And then the next question that we asked is that how difficult do you think in today's world it is to put one plus one together and identify that who the person possibly could be behind a mobile number? It's quite easy. So, therefore, we have to do a bit of a strict interpretation there that if we are handling personal data, then we need to be careful. The bucket right in the center is sensitive personal data. Okay, so before I go into sensitive personal data, the way to protect only personal data, which is not sensitive in nature, is through consent. So you will have to take appropriate consent, and then you are largely through. Okay, so remember, consent is king. um, Sensitive personal data is basically things like medical information, uh, financial information. I will take you through the entire list. So that is what is sensitive personal data, and that requires not only proper consent, but also following of certain legal requirements. I'll go through all of this in detail. But what we observe often that people usually are in a mode of denial when we ask about this point of sensitive personal data. So when we go for, say, due diligence for a merger or acquisition, which is bread and butter for us, and we are very often we ask that, are you handling any sensitive data? They will say, no, it's a small organization, we don't. And we'll start looking into the organization, and we see that there is biometric at the gate, which is sensitive. There is a lot of medical information with the HR because there is medical insurance, etc., being done. There are financial information available of employees, etc. So, sum and substance is that we need to understand. We do not have a culture of privacy ordinarily. So, the point here would be that I would like all of you to be the privacy champions in your organization. Go back and start questioning yourself, your people, educating everyone, because demonstrating compliance is becoming a very big thing. And the moment you sensitize people, I think that is half your battle won. I was before all this, lockdown happened. In the month of February end, I think I was traveling somewhere, and I went to a hotel. I was checking in. I saw that there was a laptop kept at the portico, and there was a quick check-in counter there where it said that you could take assistance of a receptionist and quickly check in there. Right below the laptop screen was a post-it with the password of that particular laptop. Now, do you think that the organization would not have implemented all the tech measures that are required? The answer is probably no. They would have spent a lot on a tech measure, but what they did not spend on is the last person standing in the counter, the person who's supposed to know the importance of a password. So the issue is today that whilst our organizations have taken, say, our temperature recording, our health related information, and they continue to take, and possibly after lockdown is over, also they will take, how to handle, how to keep this data is something that is not completely known. And if that person is not educated on how it is to be handled, there is a high probability that you will scar your employees for life. India is a different society. If by chance any information relating to any person's possible, contamination or getting impacted by COVID goes out, I'm telling you, it is not only this organization. Possibly wherever the person goes in future, the person would be scarred for life. So it is extremely important to know how this is to be handled. Let me give you another example of another hotel where we were doing a GDPR related exercise. Now, GDPR, as you know, is a European law, General Data Protection Regulation, is applicable in relation to European Union people. So basically, what we were doing is we were carrying out an exercise to find out that how many people from the European Union had come. And to our surprise, we saw a humongous number of people had come from Afghanistan. So we were quite perplexed, and so was the hotel. Then we realized what had happened. The person who was there at the people who were handling the front desk, there was a drop down menu when someone checks in and you enter the information. The drop down menu's first item was Afghanistan. So no one bothered to change it. Now look at the funny situation right now. You have a situation where you need to really find out, how many people are there from EU, but you have a huge set of wrong data. Short point, learning is here. The learning for all of us here is that we need to have correct data information, and then we also need to protect it. So with that, I move on to the next slide, which is I would like to break this discussion up into two parts. Okay, the first part is stage one of this COVID-19, which is initial outbreak and the measures that were taken. And you would see that there were a lot of knee-jerk reactions which were applied, and people suddenly. I remember one of our clients actually came running to us saying that we have put up a thermal scanning device at the gate, and some of the employees are not aware, and they have been creating a lot of hue and cry. So we say that I will tell you how it is to be. Just one second. So basically, what we told them is that what are the processes to be um, carried out, and appropriate notice and consent is extremely critical here. Okay, and again, as I was mentioning to you, it is not very difficult. It is not very technical in how you need to and what you need to write in the notice and consent. And I'll take you through all of those in the next slides. Um, and then, of course, we took all those declarations about medical conditions, travel history, etc. And for that, you need to ensure that you have reasonable security practices and procedures. There are certain restrictions in relation to disclosure and transfer, which you need to be mindful. Suppose you have a service provider who is providing services in relation to data. So you simply pass all that information that you have collected about these individuals in your organization at the time of COVID outbreak, if it is passed on to them, then there are certain safeguards to be sort of followed. And finally, how you keep notifying the relevant employees and who is a repository of this particular information is important. At the end of the entire exercise, remember you need to have data minimization, purging, or deleting of the information. So let's understand before we do all of this, like go into the nitty gritties of how you need to write a notice and how what should be there in your consent, etc. Let us understand. So basically, what you need to understand is what is the legal framework in India today. Okay? We do not have any exclusive legislation. Right to privacy, of course, has become a fundamental right, but the law that would really be applicable to organizations and individuals in relation to privacy is getting prepared right now, which is called the Personal Data Protection Bill. So on a sector neutral basis, what is the law that we have? It is the Information Technology Act, and we have a set of rules, which is the this name that you see in front of you: Information Technology Reasonable Security Practices and Procedures and Sensitive Personal Data or Information Rules 2011. In short, we'll call it the Privacy Rules or SPDI rules. Apart from these, there are sectoral regulations which are there, and which is simply put, Reserve Bank of India giving diktat about privacy to banks and NBFCs, IRDI giving diktat to insurance players, so on and so forth. Also, there are other legislations which, like Indian Penal Code, the Consumer Protection Act, Indian Contract Act, etc. They also play a patchwork of role in the entire scheme of things as far as privacy is concerned. Now, let me take you through a couple of provisions of the Information Technology Act. The idea is not to really throw a book at you, but the reason I am taking you through these provisions is that so that you have a basic understanding of what is sensitive data, what is personal data, how they are to be protected. So what does this section 43A says? It says that if you are handling any kind of sensitive personal data, for example, that temperature recording or health related information that you have collated for your from your employees, then you need to have reasonable security practices and procedures. And if you do not follow them, then you're liable to pay. If there is wrongful loss or wrongful gain caused, then you are liable to pay damages by way of compensation. Now, look at this. People woke up to the situation when GDPR came into effect because of the huge and high penalty, which is 20 million euro or 4% of annual global turnover, whichever is higher. But this is absolutely, mind-boggling. I would say that we had always got a provision which was uncapped, um, and the weapon here is in the hands of the individual. So it's not that the regulator will come knocking at your door, and that day, you can sort of see how you would react to it. It is basically, say, a rogue employee, or say a customer who's angry could really put a spoke in them. That you have got my sensitive data, please. If there has been a wrongful loss or wrongful gain caused, please, damages are payable. And we have seen many such cases which are reported also. So in such a situation, what to do really? Like as I was telling you, that consent is really king. Okay, so if you look at the fine reading of the law, and when it's talking about reasonable security practices and procedures. Look at the first part, and I'll read this out for you. It means, so basically, if you look at this, it says that security practices and procedures designed to protect such information from unauthorized access, damage, use, modification, disclosure, or impairment, as may be specified in an agreement between the parties or as may be specified in an. So this is a very interesting flaw, actually, I would say, lacuna. In ordinary times, we say, tell clients to ignore it. But in the present situation, where we have to see that how we meet the requirement of the law, and again, the reason is that our law does not give a special leeway just because there is a pandemic, you need not follow the law. At the same time, also these relaxations that are coming in are not saying that commercial organizations need to follow any of these laws. Okay? So you have to be very mindful that we are in a tricky situation, and we have to see how best to really, be within the purview of the law. At the same time, see that we don't have to go overboard. So here, what I'm giving you is a bit of a practical solution. That consent would remain king. So if you have adequate consent, you are that's the first milestone. That's the largest milestone that you have, and you should be largely through. So let's now understand what is sensitive data as per Indian law. It is passwords, biometrics, sexual orientation, physical, physiological, mental health condition, medical records and history, financial. Now, if you look at this, many of these are not defined. So please try and give it a bit of a expansive reading. Okay. For example, financial information such as bank account, credit card, or debit card, or other payment instrument details. Some people used to think that this is only the card number, and then there were a lot of litigations which ultimately confirmed that no, financial information should be given a broad meaning. Okay, even bank account statement, etc., were all considered to be financial. But one thumb rule here, like I was telling you, in order to be sensitive data, the data has to be personal information first. So, what is personal information? If you see the bottom of the slide, it says information that relates to a natural person, which either directly or indirectly, in combination with other information available or likely to be available with a body corporate, is capable of identifying the person. Like I was mentioning to you, that if it is anonymized or if you are not able to identify the person, then you are largely out of the purview of these laws. Let's go to the next slide. So, what do you do in case you have any sensitive data? Well, these are the requirements which are set out as per the law. There are reasonable security practices and procedures to be followed. There are disclosure related norms which are to be followed. Consent has to be obtained in a particular manner. There has to be a grievance officer. There are norms in relation to collection. There are norms in relation to transfer, and of course, privacy policy has to be. I'll pause on this privacy policy for 1 second, because we have observed often that this policy is often a very neglected item. Okay, and no one basically bothers too much. In fact, I have had situations where clients have come and said, I have pulled out the privacy policy of my competitors and I have done a mix and match, can you please take a look? There are stated judgments. For example, there is this American Express judgment, where American Express was held to be liable for violating their own privacy policy. Let me give you another example, live example, which we faced as just before the GDPR was coming into effect. One of our clients, people, they came to my office and asked me that, boss has sent me to you. And from tomorrow onwards, there is some law on GDPR which is coming. Can you just make these relevant changes in this document? I will upload it on my website tonight so that tomorrow morning onwards, I will be GDPR compliant. So I made him sit down. We had coffee, and I explained to him, this is what the law precisely doesn't want you to do. No lip service. What you are actually doing, what you are supposed to do, has to be, sort of done and then stated here. Otherwise, you will be in a bigger suit. And we have been part of several, investigation processes. We have helped clients. There are situations where, say, an ED investigating officer has read up the privacy policy, taken a printout, read out the policy, and marked relevant portions and given it to the attorney and said that, can you tell me how you are following XYZ things? So you can imagine the importance of policies because these are outward looking. Today, when we are all working from home, how many of our organizations have a proper work from home policy, teleworking policy, or bring your own device policy? Are we really having the most relevant elements there? There are certain things which are to be written, very very important elements which are to be there in these policies. Are they really there? If it is not there, maybe it's a good time to take a relook and add those and then circulate it to your people. This can be through email. The consent, remember here that notice and consent are two different things. Okay, so if it's an advisory, it can suffice as a notice, and if there is a consent requirement, that can be through any mode of electronic communication, including a simple I accept or I agree over email should also do, should not be a problem. Let us understand this now. This privacy rules, what should we do there? So when you're collecting this information, what all you should keep in mind? Well, you collect it only if it is necessary. The information should be used only for the purpose for which it is collected. And information provider should know that the information is being collected. Like I was telling you, that whole issue in relation to the heat sensing camera or thermal imaging that some of the organizations were doing without informing their people. So it will be mindful about things like these. Inform the people. They should be aware that the information is being collected. Purpose of collection, the intended recipients of this, name and address of the agency that is collecting and retaining the information. Sensitive data should not be retained for longer than it is required, and you have to provide the information provider the permission to review and amend the information if they so believe. Now, disclosure. There are certain parameters for disclosure. You can disclose the information as per the agreement or if you have taken prior consent or permission of the information provider. Of course, government agencies which are mandated by law have a leeway, no problem. Consent that has to be taken in relation to sensitive data is this, very important for all of you. You need to obtain prior consent from provider of sensitive data regarding the purpose of usage, why, how it will be used, and why. If you intend to transfer this to any, say, third party or whoever you want to, because say for reasons of processing, etc., any sensitive data, then you need to be mindful of these. It can be sent to anyone, okay, within the country, outside the country, there is no problem today. But they need to ensure the same level of data protection that I just mentioned to you, all these provisions that I mentioned earlier. And it can be only transferred if, if it is necessary for the performance of lawful contract or where such provider of information has consented. Now, what do I write in the privacy policy? Common question, often asked. These are the things that you should put in your privacy policy. On the left hand side, if you see the type of information that you're collecting, the purpose of collection, the security practices and procedures that you are following, and your disclosure policy. Also, you need to have a grievance officer. Again, please don't get sort of hassled by the fact that, oh my God, I have to have a grievance officer appointed. There is no requirement specifically set out that the person has to be a technological, technology tech person or an engineer or a legal person. It can be anyone who's able to address any kind of grievance in relation to information. So designate a grievance officer to address grievances. Name and contact details of this person should be published in the website. and the grievance officer needs to redress the grievances within a month. So, sorry, Shushavan, I'll just pause for a second.
Sure.
There is a request for annotations. I'll approve that.
Okay.
I have to decline, not control the slide. Okay, so you can hear me clearly, but right?
Yeah, that's what said. I've asked the audience in the chat box. They have said it's fine.
It's fine. Okay, right. And slide changes are also happening properly.
Yeah.
Great. Okay, thank you so much. So I'll continue. So basically, the other important provision that I would like all of you to sort of know is this another section called 72A, which deals with only personal data. Okay, mind you, till now, whatever I was talking about is all that sensitive data, medical information, etc. But if you now see, this provision is talking about only personal data. And if you are disclosing this personal data without the consent of the person concerned or in breach of a lawful contract, then you could be punished with imprisonment for up to 3 years or with fine up to 5 lakh rupees or more. So, but one catch here, this is applicable in a service provider, service recipient type of a situation. Do not apply this to a employer employee situation because this section is not applicable. So that is it from the present day scenario. I'll just pause for a few minutes, and maybe Shushav and I we can take some questions right now, and then I move on to the phase two.
Sure. I think it's fine. I think a few of the questions I've already parked. Uh,
Okay.
one has asked, does this GDPR apply to UK after the Brexit? That was
Okay. So so no, the plan is not that would not apply. Yes.
okay. Uh, Anyone else? If you want to shoot any queries in this situation, you can unmute yourself also and talk. Yeah, please
Yeah,
go ahead.
so Amar here.
Yeah, this is Aniket. This is Aniket speaking from Indian Institute of Public Administration. I'm a research officer. My question pertains to your reference to the upcoming data protection bill. Uh,
Yeah.
the when we did go through the draft bill and we were part of the roundtable conferences being held, a lot of problems were brought up regarding to sharing of this personal data with reference to national security, which is an ambiguous term, which is not specifically defined per se. So when the institutions or any organization has access or has repository of this personal data and are asked by the government, what is the right method for these organizations to follow to determine whether they should or should not uh, uh, impart the information that any organization, central, state, district is asking? Thank you.
Great, thanks. I think brilliant question. Okay, now let me tell you my journey throughout this particular bill preparation process. So I have been integral part of, or have been following it very, very closely for about 2 years now, because you know the whole journey, how it has gone from one stage to the other, white paper, then actual framing of the law. There were consultations held across the country. We have attended every single consultation meet held across the country. We have also had discussions one on one with Justice Sri Krishna, and we have explained the pain points such as the one that you were just mentioning. And I'll tell you, when we started the whole journey of preparing this new law for India, which is the Personal Data Protection Bill, the golden idea that all of us had was that we would now have a law which is uniformly applicable to both government and the body corporates. At they would all be at the same level with very, very minuscule differences or special rights being given to the government. And that is how the whole thing unfolded. And that went from one stage to the other. Then Justice Sri Krishna gave his report to the ministry meeting, and thereafter it was tabled in the parliament. Okay. Now, between that earlier version of the bill, which was handed over, which is called the Personal Data Protection Bill 2018, to the next version, which was Personal Data Protection Bill 2019, there are some very drastic changes which we as civil society should know. And these pertain to the relaxations that have been given to the government bodies, agencies, and people who can sit in that authority, which is the mother authority, which is supposed to handle all kind of data protection related issues. And that is basically a all powerful judge, jury, legislator, regulator, everything. What has happened is this relaxation that has been given has created a bit of a furor or uproar, and you would be aware that right after it was placed in the parliament, it had to be shunted to the joint parliamentary committee of 30 members. The 30-member committee thereafter again called for inputs from the civil society. Everyone was permitted to give their inputs, and we again gave inputs where we still thought that there are lacunae, issues, etc. Hopefully, after this whole COVID situation is over, the joint parliamentary committee is supposed to now call for personal hearings. We have also requested. I have also personally written for such a presentation, considering that there are certain very critical elements which requires one-on-one discussion as well. Just a bit of a background. I was also called by the ministry, so the MAITI had separately written to me in relation to some of the additional points before the draft bill went into the parliament, and I had given my inputs there as well. So I have urged them to call me once. Some of these points, like the one that you are mentioning, I would like to personally pick up and do mention that these are things which are absolutely critical and needs further elaboration or detailing. Number one. Number two, there is a lot of things that the government also needs to do. Let me give you a very classic example. We are talking today big about data minimization, right? Data minimization is basically we will only save minimal data that is required. But imagine we are in a society where almost none or very minuscule portion of our laws have a expiry date or end date for storing data. So we store data out of fear. What I already mentioned, I would like to again emphasize is that we need to have laws which come with an end date, and only then can we have data minimization. So I hope I've been able to throw some light on your question.
So I have one question, Supratim. This is Sudeep. Hello.
Yes.
The thing is that for the consent for a corporate office is not a problem. But in case of EPC sites, where the majority of the laborers are not aware of all these laws, so how this is possible to take the consent from them?
Right. Fantastic question. And I think, Shodipda, I will also add that with some of the discussions that we had with the committee, the Justice Sri Krishna committee, when we were talking about consent. Consent in the Indian context is broken, I would say,
Yeah.
because it is fallacious concept. Because look at the number of illiterate people, look at the number of people who are speaking varied languages, and in an app you will have everything written in English, and they will have to press I agree or I accept and move on into the basically a leave it or take it or leave it kind of a concept. Okay.
Yeah.
So that is what was deliberated. And the 5 6 simple apps that we have, I think it will take about 50 odd hours to read their terms and conditions and privacy policy. So we have a consent fatigue. That is an accepted problem in our society overall. But what was also deliberated are two things. One is, why don't we come up with innovative solutions like writing some of the important aspects of consent, how it will badly impact you. For example, you are applying for a job, and that job portal is selling your information to a third party. Now, that is super critical for you, right? If that
Mm.
is not told to you upfront on the application, you are being
Mm.
fooled. So
Correct.
the idea was to say that, okay, at least these super critical items should pop up separately. Then there were ideas given by some of the tech people who said that, why don't we have a short video when you are downloading the app? You can see that video as to how it is being impacted. Then we also requested that, why don't we have this information being provided in relevant languages. So the only win that I can say is two wins actually, I would say. One is that there is a hanging statement now in the personal data protection bill, which states that you should try and translate it into the relevant languages as feasible. Number one. Number two
Okay.
is that
Okay.
because consent is broken, now we have a concept which is built in relation to a score being provided. Okay,
Hmm.
this score is basically to make you understand the credibility of that particular data controller for certain circumstances. Okay, certain very important ones. So what I would like to say is there are two pillars again. One is, of course, consent is required, but the second part is it is not only consent which guides everything. It is also, after that also, you need to be protecting it adequate. So that is
Correct.
what is being envisaged.
But see,
So I hope I've been able, yeah.
it's a huge task actually to implement
It
this
is.
in
It is.
the.
I tell me. Let me tell you. Let me tell you that I have observed the entire journey of GDPR. A country which, they already had a robust law. It was just one step up for them. For us, it is a quantum leap from nowhere, nothing to all of this. It would be a we don't have a culture of privacy, like I was telling you. New person comes into the organization, HR will send an email saying that welcome so and so to our organization. That may be having the person's personal email ID, mobile number, blood group, home address, everything. Is it really required? Answer is no. But problem is that
Even
we
the
need to
wife's
slowly,
name.
of course,
Wife's
all of
name
that.
also there.
I'm telling you. So this is what we need to change, and that is the first task. That's why when I started off, I say that every person attending this particular session, I would urge all of you to start thinking that how we can be privacy champions. Okay, build in small pegs. If you start explaining small stuffs to even the last person on the floor of your organization, I think these small wins will help you by the time this loss leaves the lighter.
Correct. Thank you.
Yeah,
Thank
I think I'll continue because then maybe.
We have many
Yeah.
questions, so maybe we can park this now, or should we
Yes, yes.
want to take few more questions now, or
Let us go to the end and then possibly,
yeah, sure. I've
uh,
already parked in
how-
4 5 questions, so maybe you can continue.
whatever you suggest. I am
No,
okay
no. So
either
I
way, but I
think
think
your flow will be lost. So it's better is because this subject is so critical. There will be many questions. I think you should
right,
finish your presentation. Then we'll take a peacefully the questions.
correct. Okay, okay. So let us now understand the second stage or second phase that we are in. Okay, and so this is our work from home situation where suddenly we never envisage this situation and we are all into this. And I remember one of our clients again came running saying that, a lot of information which was only available within office premises has to be now uploaded to a cloud and it will be accessible by our employees from their organizations. What should we do? We say that, listen, there are two things which I can tell you. That one is the physical controls are completely off. Okay. There is no physical control today. There is a bit of logical control, remote control that you can apply here. But therefore, what becomes very important is trust your employees, train your employees, and keep reminding them about the obligations of non-disclosure, data protection, or confidentiality that they have. That is the best thing that you can do. And believe me, I think a large part of our business ecosystem that is working today is working on that solid trust. That people, you just need to reach out to your people and just keep updating them. Okay, if there are, say, these kind of emails, you need to be a little careful because there's a lot of phishing attacks happening. If there is a payment related communication which comes which looks fishy to you, pick up the phone and just speak with the person. Okay, do not simply send out a payment instruction. There are, I'm telling you, of late we have been observing a lot of man in the middle attacks, phishing, and I'm telling you, phishing attacks have also become so sophisticated. It is not only about click here to know who has COVID around you. That was old. We later on came to know, okay, there are certain phishing attacks which are saying that please click here in order to increase your EMI date and all that. Now we have phishing attacks which are saying attend this fabulous free webinar, things like this. So again, the point is that these are anxious times. People are not in the right frame of mind. So being an organization, I think it is very important that the communication keeps on going, and over communicating is much better right now. Is that what all are the do's and don'ts? Okay, what are you should be doing and should be careful about? The second element I would like to talk about is about audio video calls. We are on several platforms right now, you know, and because many, whatever your client, your customer, etc., whoever is preferring whatever platform, we have to log on and speak with them over those. You've come across the whole issue or fiasco in relation to Zoom, the advisories that are being issued. Short point is, again, what you can do, at least as a basic check, is check the credibility, check the privacy policy, the settings of the conference which are available. In the next slide, I'll show you some of them, uh, which could just be a first guard for you, first level of control or check for you. Then is usage of personal devices. Again, very important to have a bring your own device type of policy or teleworking policy, things like those, which cover this situation, which is telling you the personal space and the professional space, how it is to be divided. And be careful of the internet connections, the VPN, the router that you're using. It should not have your, you should change the password there, run your antivirus. And on the right hand side, if you see, what I've written is remote monitoring for unusual activities and access speed bumps could be some of the methods adopted by organizations. Lastly, we see a lot of action around e-contracting and electronic signatures or digital signatures. But there's a lot of confusion also, let me tell you. So just keep it very, very simple. I would say, electronic records are sanctified by the law. You can have electronic transactions or sign-offs, but there are a small set of small negative list which has got 5 items really, like negotiable instruments, power of attorney, trust deed, wills, and contract for sale and transfer of immovable property. So these are the few things which you cannot do electronically. It is outside the purview of the Information Technology Act as well. So this, minus this, I think you are good to go. Apart from that, the other confusion which lies is in relation to digital signature and electronic signature. What happened is when our Information Technology Act was crafted, it always had the provision of digital signature and it was properly crafted. In the year 2009, they brought in this Amendment Act of IT Amendment Act 2008, which I think created some confusion because they tried to plug in the elements of electronic signature across the entire law. And because of which, what has happened, it was not incorporated very appropriately. I would say it gives confusing signals at times. Short point being that all the parameters in relation to electronic signatures are all set out, all safeguards, etc., and it has to be set out in the second schedule of the IT Act. And presently, the second schedule of the IT Act sanctifies Aadhaar-based e-sign. If you are having those, then the presumption of law is in your favor, and we are good to go. Let's move on to the next slide. So I was talking to you about this whole, audio video video conferences and the kind of things that you can do as a basic check again. Password enabled login and sharing of link with only authorized persons. Suddenly, we were observing right at the beginning of this lockdown, random Zoom related or other, links which were floating on Facebook, WhatsApp, everywhere. Okay, and some of these issues started cropping up from then on. Then use features like waiting room. Okay, people should be waitlisted, and then one by one, the person can be cleared into the room, chat room. Disable features that let participants to join before the host is joined. Very important. Control content sharing. Very important again. Permission should be sought before it is shared. Ensure consent for recording and storage should be with the authorized person only, and ensure that participation is locked after the authorized participants have joined. And after that, also, I would tell you as a thumb rule, how I would like to still protect you further, is that after all of this, if you believe that something is super, super critical and it should not be shared otherwise, just send it as a password protected attachment to the other person. Let the person open it and speak over the phone on that particular, say, a price sensitive information. I would still recommend that possibly do this because, I have a lot of friends in the tech fraternity in cybersecurity space, and they keep telling me, you have just heard about Zoom. Okay. Do you know how many vulnerabilities the others have? And of course, there is a long list for each one of them. So, short. The basic ones, I think this can keep us safe to some extent. So, as I was telling to you that, this whole best practices for work from home is not only the responsibility of individual. Organization should also do a lot of things. Some touch points, some very basic elements which I thought of. Uh, Work from home policy to be uploaded on the website, and electronic consent may be taken wherever it is required. Provide a basic cybersecurity advice. Keep sending them, okay, awareness on phishing emails, links, not, not using public Wi-Fi, not downloading from untrusted apps. Tell them that if, you consider yourself to be in the office. If you are not downloading something in the office, you are not going to download it at home. Simple. Deploy VPN, secure virtual desktop, sensitize on breach reporting. Very important. If there is some unusual activity, you should tell them that what is to be done, how to report. Discourage local storage of critical sensitive information and switch to secure solutions. Enable session timeouts or remote operations and automatic screen lock. Review your non-disclosure agreements and other undertakings and for protecting confidentiality of client and business information. Remind employees of their obligations. Have a contingency plan in case any of your key personnel falls sick. Very important. Have a division of important role strategies in advance. And one last point which I would like to mention here before I go to the next slide is when things are good and you start going back to your office, also have a plan for all the equipments that will go back to your system. So, some people have moved desktops, printers, etc., to employee homes, and it will all go back to office probably very, very soon. But before that happens, ensure that there is a quarantine for that also. Ensure that you sanitize those equipments both physically and electronically. There could be some downloads which have happened, which if it is connected to your network could damage your office network. So just ensure all of that is in place before you go ahead and make things operational back in office. Lastly, for employees, I have mentioned quite a bit, but just a few sign-offs. Ensure compliance with work from home policy, teleworking policy, and all other policies that you have. Frequently reset your passwords, use password manager, two-factor authentication wherever possible. Refrain from using personal emails, unauthorized services for sharing of office information. Ensure that all security patches are up to date, antiviruses are updated, and all that. Disable remember password function. Important. Call the sender of the message to verify if you have received any suspicious communication. I told you about this. And avoid clicking on unreliable, unverified links, email attachments to protect against phishing and other cyber attacks. Promptly report any cybersecurity incidents and data breach or unusual activity. So, with that, I come to the end of the presentation. I hope I've been able to add some value. I'm now open for questions.
Thank you. Thank you, Supratim. So we have around 5-6 questions parked. So let me start with that, and then we'll take the questions from the audience. First question was from Mr. Banerjee. As per law, is there any restriction about the type of data to be shared without individual's permission?
Yeah, and so let us understand this like I told, there are two buckets of personal information. One is normal personal information that requires a normal permission to be taken. Okay? There is nothing spelled out in law as to how you should take that particular consent. But in relation to sensitive data, there are other set of requirements which I just spoke about. How the consent should be taken, etc., is provided. But again, the good leeway that is given is it can be through any mode of electronic communication or even physically obtained. So if it is personal information, it is to be normal permission to be obtained. And if it is sensitive, then there are additional requirements to be followed. Not taking consent is only possible for regulatory purposes today. And again, it is quite a minuscule bucket. Apart from that, you have to follow the law.
Next will be Navneet has asked, what are the things to be mastered by an advocate to help clients, and as of now, how to gain practical experience?
Sorry, can you just repeat the question?
Yeah.
Hello? Leo.
Yeah. So the question was, what are the things to be mastered by an advocate to help
Hmm.
clients, and as of now, how to gain practical experience?
Okay, so I think practical experience can only come through practical knowledge. Unfortunately, there I cannot help. But I think as a reading up, I can give you a suggestion, and I already told in the initial part of my talk is that Information Technology Act plays a very important sector agnostic, sector neutral role, and that could be a good starting point. But after you are done with the IT Act, you should start going into the sector related regulations also. For example, Reserve Bank of India, what has it called? Stated for banks. You should also look into, say, IRDAI, medical related, provisions which are there, all of this is basically a gradual process how you build up your acumen, and as you go ahead and start working, start reading up, you will realize that you will start getting a lot of knowledge which can help you in implementing these.
Okay. So there are many questions getting flooded in the chat box. So I'll go quickly. Kulban said, how to take consent from each employee where employee volume is high.
No, so that is a process that you have to follow, unfortunately. And there is no thumb rule. Of course, there are consent managers which are available right now. People are doing this as a professional service. But my suggestion to you is look at it, this way. Like I was mentioning, notice and consent are two different buckets. Okay. Understand where all you need to give notice, and possibly that could be put up at a very prominent location, put up on your website, etc. within so these are things that you can work on. Consent wherever it is required, you could possibly do it through an online process where it is possible, and that way you also are able to safely and for a long term keep all the information safeguarded. So that is a suggestion that I can provide to you. But yes, there is no magic wand. You have to take consent, and advisable that you take appropriate consent. Methods would vary from organization to organization, but today there are enough and more tools available for that.
Sure. Someone asked, what is required to do lawyers in privacy area to be successful?
I think so. Privacy is the new buzzword. Of course, several lawyers are trying to now understand this better, which is a good thing, because truly speaking, there is a dearth of good lawyers, or people who understand technology and law, including privacy and data protection. um, I would say, again, I'll go back to the other question that I responded to. Do start reading up on these lines, and as I was mentioning, and I'm sure that as go days go by, more and more requirement would flow. You would get to have hands-on experience, and I think that is the way to go.
All right. Someone asked, what will be the what penalty applies in case of any official data is breached?
So, see, official data breach has got two ramifications. Okay, one is your contractual obligation, which is between you and your counterparty. So basically, you will have an agreement which that other guy, the provider of information would say that if you have breached any information, then you would be responsible for indemnifying me, okay, or giving XYZ quantum of liquidated damages, etc. So that is one part, which is basically purely contractual, and you have to look into your document what is written there. Number one. Number two is otherwise also you could be held responsible for breach of trust, and wherever there is a legal requirement, like I mentioned to you in relation to, say, sensitive data or personal data, there are other pockets of avenues available to natural persons to come behind you. If those are triggered, then the penalties associated with those provisions would also apply.
All right. There is a question. Can you please suggest a list of policies which needs to be displayed in company website regarding data privacy and related laws?
See, this it would be dependent on which sector you are in, and that would guide largely as to what all you need to trade. But what you have to put up in relation to on a sector agnostic basis, that if you are not under a regulated in regulated sector like say banking and finance or pharma or healthcare, etc., then I have already shown a slide to you which clearly spells out what all are the things to be written. And you see, if you remember when I was talking about these information, this, if you see the privacy policy, what all are the things to be written there, defense officer details have to be mentioned, etc. Just be mindful of these.
Okay. Amor, I think you have many questions, so I think you can unmute and talk directly. That will be easier.
Sure, Dada. So, before I get into the corporate side of my questions, I want to ask you, Supratim, how can a graduate enter into the field of cyber security, privacy, data protection law? Because I do a lot of career counseling for these freshers coming out of BTech MBA colleges, paying hefty amounts of money and with lot of job challenges. So
Right.
anything that you can tell me which I can pass on to them, then that will be like I'll be very thankful to you.
Right. No, I think a very good point. And I will tell you, Amar, from my experience, what has happened is students get misguided. Sometimes I have seen law students also across 5 years, they are doing space law related research. And then suddenly, at the end of 5 years, they think that now I have to earn money. And they come and ask that, can I do mergers and acquisitions or things like, cyber law and, privacy data protection, because these are high, paying jobs per se. So my suggestion is twofold. One is there has to be a natural acumen, okay, which I have observed that is the key one, because I have trained several people. I have seen that the people who have a natural acumen or inclination towards technology, they pick these up very quickly. Otherwise, it takes a lot of effort for people who are not naturally inclined. Okay, that's number one. Secondly, as far as getting into this profession is concerned, there are a lot of courses which are available, which can be a starting point, but you have to have pick up the law book and read it yourself. So I really, before I read any commentary, before I take any course, and believe me, for GDPR also, even I had to undergo courses and all that, but before I did that, I picked up the bare act, the bare reading of the law by yourself is the most important thing. So if they are able to do it and make sense of things, it is then you can always suggest for them to go for other courses, and then slowly move to the professional world.
Okay. There was a questions regarding signing agreement through DocuSign. Will it be valid?
Mm.
There will be no stamp and other things.
I would be charging the for this particular opinion though.
Okay.
So it's a very important one, and as I was telling, I have already given the response during my presentation. You would have followed. There is a natural presumption in favor of digital signature and electronic signature as they are mentioned in the IT. Anything else that you are doing, your natural presumption would not be available, and there is a different way to look at it. So I think the core answer I've already given.
All right. Just Saminathan asked difference between here and Indian PDP bill. When will it be implemented in India, and what are the major impacts we can expect in India after its implementation?
Sorry, I just missed the first part of the question. It got chipped off a little
First
bit.
one
Could you
was
please?
what is the difference between GDPR and India's PDP bill,
Okay.
and second was when the bill will be implemented, and third is what will be the major impacts after this implementation.
Okay. So first one, I think if I have to really, take you through the differences, I will need another 1.5 2 hour class. But let me give you a real life example that I have, gone through and realize that how we as Indians sometimes get very mesmerized by foreign laws and legislations. Of course, GDPR is the gold standard of the world, and it sets out a lot of principles. So there was one particular bank which had engaged a foreign service provider and had implemented GDPR in their organization. After that, they thought that there is nothing further required as per the present day law and for the future law of India because they are already on seventh heaven. We were called in for doing a simple, dipstick analysis at whether everything is okay as per Indian law as well. We started looking into simple things and realized the kind of fiasco that had happened. Let me give you only few of them. The age of consent in our country even today is 18 years. Under GDPR, it is 16 years. Member states can take it below up to 13 years. Next, financial information is considered to be sensitive personal data even today under our laws. Of course, in the future law as well, in the PDP bill, GDPR does not consider it. um, Breach reporting is that 72-hour requirement for breach reporting which is there, but I think our law, when we were describing or deliberating on the with the committee, we mentioned that we have a more business friendly and correct approach to uh, breach notification. And that is that if a breach occurs, you go to the authority, explain what you have got, what you have found out, and then a joint discussion takes place. Thereafter, it is decided whether need to go out to the world and tell about it, or you should gather more information. Tech environment, you would know in 72 hours, probably you will get to know nothing. And at that hour, if you are told that it is mandatory for you to go out to the world and tell that there has been a breach, you could destroy your business irreparably when possibly personal information is not even impacted. So I think it is a very balanced approach that we have taken. We have not aped GDPR there. Another example is right to be forgotten. The right to be forgotten, the way it is written globally, is quite different from the way we have written it. Right to be forgotten globally means I will erase everything about you to the last dot. In a tech environment, again, you would know it is extremely difficult to sign off on such a statement because there could be backups, etc. And there could be some reminiscence of your details remaining. But what is it that you are trying to guard against? What is the menace that you are trying to curb? It is basically right against further disclosure or further processing. And that is how our PDP bill writes it, and not the way the GDPR has written. I can go on and on. It will be, as I told you, it will be a 1 2 hour session. That's about it in the first bucket. The second bucket is basically when it will be implemented. I think it is anyone's guess now. We were expecting that possibly by the end of this year, the law could be at least passed by the parliament. The reason is because the Joint Parliamentary Committee was supposed to give its report in the monsoon session, and thereafter it was supposed to be floored. Considering the COVID situation, possibly it will get delayed slightly. But let me again give you a thought from the author of this particular law, which is Justice Sri Krishna. He said that it was a Thursday or a Friday, and he was flying off for, I think, to the US when our law minister, Mr. Ravi Shankar Prasad, called him and said that, sir, देश का एक काम करना है. Say that, okay, what work I have to do? Say that, you have to chair this committee for preparing of this personal data protection bill. Uh, said, okay, but what is the hurry? He said, no, sir, please agree to this. Anyways, he agreed. And I think this was a Thursday or a Friday. And he went off to wherever he had to go, flew out. And what he came to know was that on Monday, the government went to the Supreme Court and told that where they were getting pulled up because there is no data protection law in the country and all. The government told the Supreme Court that don't worry, we will soon have a law in place, and because Justice Sri Krishna is supposed to chair this committee and get in a new law for us. So what today he really is upset about is that the more you are delaying this particular law, the more you are denying the fundamental right to privacy to people in India. So hopefully we'll get to see this maybe later this year or next year. But of course, right now, given the situation, it is very difficult to predict. And what will happen when this comes into actually effect? Well, we have had seen the GDPR experience. I already told you, GDPR for Europe was for European Union was one step up from their previous law, which was good enough, which was comprehensive. For us, it is a quantum leap. Therefore, there was a moratorium or sort of period of 18 months given for preparation. That has been removed right now. That 18 months window is gone. Now possibly we will have a staggered approach in implementing it, and hopefully either possibly it could be either paced up or down, but some time would be given for organizations to prepare. My suggestion honestly is that we should start preparing today. The reason is that what is getting debated in the parliament is on a very high level. Okay, who should sit in the committee, whether government organ should get any access to the data, etc. That will not change your or my life. Okay, we will have to still follow the gold principles of what is going in the notice, what is being taken as a consent. We should start implementing this from today, so that
रुकिए मैं बाहर जा रहा हूँ.
by the time it actually comes into effect, you would be
Hello.
largely there.
Yeah, Ajay ji, बोलिए.
Sorry, I just came back. I lost my net connection as usual. This is a question to Supratim. Yeah, 1 second. This call is up. It's very simple. Would you like to throw some light on the status of the Disha Act?
Sir, Disha Act, I think my personal opinion again is one of the worst drafted laws till date. Extremely personal opinion. I don't think that it also,
If you want my personal opinion, none of the laws which have been drafted are pathetic. They're all pathetic.
so this
So
one I
even the
think was,
privacy
was
bill.
particularly bad because some of the global golden principles which apply overall. For example, non-utilization of anonymized data for commercial purposes. I don't know if they at all understood who, the whole industry or how R&D works, etc., etc. So again, to my mind, it is shelved. They took feedback from the industry, etc., and thereafter it has been kind of in cold storage. I don't think it will see the light of it, not in this version.
Absolutely, I hope so. Thank you for being honest.
No, I am brutally honest on these.
No. Most of the someone used to ask me my opinion many years back when the IT Act had just come out, 2000, and I knew the history behind how it had evolved. So I said, well, what should I say? You don't keep me going. But it's unfortunately the law of the land. Over the years, it has evolved, yes. But still, it's a sad state of affairs that we have as far as the legal framework is concerned. So, really. And then privacy, if the Privacy Act, if it comes into place, someone made a very valid point that, they're asking us to overhaul the business. I'd rather close my business than if I were to go behind bars.
Oh, absolutely. And I think some of these we have to play a balancing act. You have to understand one thing, sir, and which is again the even Justice Sri Krishna was not very happy with this. That just before the Personal Data Protection Bill was supposed to be released by the committee, uh, suddenly Ministry of Health and Family Welfare released this particular law on digital health data. Now I'm telling you, there are so many places where it was contradicting the mother legislation. So the Personal Data Protection Bill is supposed to be your mother legislation below which the sectoral regulators play their role. Now, if you have so many places where it is contradicting your mother legislation, it ought to not be there or majorly overhauled.
Sure.
I have a very personal opinion. Sorry, I just like to share it, and then I'll see most of the frameworks in the country, the drafts, etc., are supposedly to be done by so-called experts and committees and all. But the final decision makers are mostly bureaucrats who have
Right.
very little understanding of the ground realities. Unfortunately,
Right.
that's the fact. And
That's a fact.
I have quite a few friends at various levels across the entire spectrum
Right.
of bureaucracy. And then they have very, very little. The approach and mindset is so bureaucratic. And so, unfortunately, the legal system. I come from a family of two judges. So I know what are the challenges of the current legal system. And it has to be a graded approach entirely. And involuntary, you can't suddenly mandate that someone will be behind bars, someone will be doing this. And then, it's the worst form of Inspector Raj. And this whole concern about the apps, being forced upon us, we don't have a privacy culture at all, and it will take years to evolve. But if suddenly it's forced upon us in the form of a law, then you have to comply, and then you always run the risk of either disrespecting, and if you and any, I can say the biggest of corporates, the smallest, will be in violation of the law, and it doesn't matter the laws agnostic to whether you are a HLL or a Reliance or a Ramji Sweetwala. The law is the law.
Okay,
I
sir.
don't know how it is done.
Let us take few more
Thank you.
questions, couple of questions.
Please.
Okay. So Supratim, there are a lot of questions that come regarding how people can migrate their careers towards data protection, legal and all. And finally, someone said, why don't you conduct some of the certificate courses regarding that? So maybe we discuss later and come out with something.
Okay.
You, me, Tathagata can discuss and find out something.
Yeah.
If something interesting can be done. Anyone from the audience, if you can, maybe you can take two more questions. So from
Yes, please.
audience side, if you can unmute.
Aniket again, sir. May I ask?
Yeah, please.
Yeah. Hi, sir. Aniket again, and Aniket Basu. So my question is pertaining to data anonymization specifically. Taking an example of the most successful app, if you can call it, the Arogya Setu app. We had a discussion yesterday on a webinar with the CEO of NEGT, and when we asked about the data being stored of according to categorization, because the app categorizes the user according to the answers given by the user into three categories. He responded that the person with a low uh, threat level is going to be on the servers for 30 days, and then 60 days, and then 90 days in three categories. The problem is that I don't think the government takes seriously the fact that data anonymization is the way forward, because there was not a clear answer regarding what if there is a data breach. Because whenever such questions have been asked, the government or any other person in any specific organization of value has evaded such questions by saying that we have all the securities in place. But anonymization, I think, to an extent, deters attacks in the first place. I would like to know your opinions on the same.
Right. I think a very important question given this situation. And I agree that anonymization takes away a lot of the teeth from this particular issue. Coming to the particular example that you were citing, in relation to Arogya Setu and how COVID-related information is being handled. Of course, these are special circumstances mandating special requirements, and therefore, not many people are ready to talk about this in open or question it or challenge it in the open. It requires non-anonymized data for certain purposes, for certain others it is different. There are a lot of measures which are being projected as safeguard measures. We are not sure how much of that is, in fact, you would be aware the whole Aadhaar controversy and how it sort of unfolded every single time there was a
Yes,
breach,
sir.
how
Yes,
there were
sir. On Twitter as well.
counter allegation. Now, you have to understand one thing: the more valuable a data set is, the more people would be or hackers would be interested in that particular data set. So, the protocols to be followed for those are to be above normal. Now, in this case, they are saying that, of course, a large number of those concerns have been apparently addressed, but some of those last mile cases where basically you are actually, suffering from COVID and then what happens with that particular information, how long it is stored, who all it goes, and all that. To my mind, I think we do not have a absolutely black and white answer today. Okay, and as you correctly mentioned that there would be people who would be shying off from this. A possible solution could be aggregated anonymized data. I agree with you on that. That if you really have to use it for good medical R&D other purposes, this would be a solution which would be helpful.
Thank you, sir.
Wonderful. Maybe we can take one last question. Anyone from the audience?
Hi, this is Ibrahim Khatri. I know this question of mine probably rolls back again to when the PDPP will be implemented, but do you have any idea by how much time will it take for India to set up a data protection authority that will go up and which will be responsible for fines, just like the ICOs that you have in UK?
Right. So, Ibrahim, the previous version of the bill had a total timeline of 18 months by when everything was supposed to be brought into place. Okay. Now, in the current version, they have the reason for this was that the drafting committee wanted that it should be implemented in a time bound manner. Okay. But unfortunately, that has been removed now, and there is no clear guidance, and it could be brought in pieces, like you would have seen in Companies Act, IBC, the way they all of these came in. It could be in that manner, and that could mean that it could either be paced up or down, like I was mentioning. Possibly, my sense is that the timeline should be in the region of 18 months to 2 years.
Right. So we are at the fag end of the discussion. Someone asked in the chat box, if my Aadhaar biometric info is compromised or breached, whom can I penalize and in what section? That is very interesting question. I don't know.
I think okay, so there are avenues which are available. Okay, it depends on how the compromise is taken place, and because I was mentioning in the previous response also, a lot of the times there is a bit of a blame game which happens. Of course, there is a reason for that also. A lot of the compromises have been observed to have happened at the point where it was being collected. So the usual defense that has been seen many times is that the person who was taking in the information was the culprit, really, not our system. So again, I'm not deep diving into it right now. It depends on how and where it has happened. There are remedies available. Thank you.
Thank you, Supratim, for your insight throughout the session. So we are about to conclude today's session. Audience, thank you for your wonderful active participation. So look forward for your future joining. Tomorrow also we have a session on 4 o'clock in the afternoon. Thank you all of you. So we are
Thank you
going
everyone
to
for
end the
your
Thank
session.
time.
you. Thank you.
Thank
Bye.
you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you.